So, Miss Madison, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great because we're going to Disney tomorrow.
Oh, is that right? Oh, yes. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Maddie Newman.
And I'm Mark Newman, Madison's Newman's dad. So, here we are, another episode.
Yes.
So, last time we talked, we just introduced ourselves to the people,
Mhm.
told them a little bit about ourselves and what was the whole genesis of this podcast. So, today, you wanted to have different discussions about a different topic. So you want to
So
introduce?
today our topic is going to be parenthood slash childhood milestones. So like milestones for parents and milestones for like children,
Oh,
specifically pertaining, I would say girlhood, girl dad.
um,
What is a core memory from my lifetime for you?
a core memory.
Yeah, like what is something that you remember oh, like it could be like when I was born or like some stuff moments that you won't like forget or like things that like stick out in your mind from like
Oh,
my evolution.
that's not even a question that I can relate to.
What do you
It's like
mean?
because every moment with you is a milestone. Okay,
Okay,
let's
but you
start
don't
with
remember like you don't know what I'm talking about when you have those like random memories, like things that you remember like super vividly that like maybe they
yeah.
yeah, so like
As a
that.
parent, we have. I mean, as parents, there is no specific vivid moment because you're constantly having vivid moment of your kid. I mean,
I have some vivid
your
moments.
birth, obviously, this is the start of the journey. Um, I remember your first word you spoke, like we
When
talked
I was
about.
birthed, did you think about like me as a grown like teenager? Like was that a thought that or were you just like I think about that like did you think about me now when I was that little or not really?
You remember what I've always said to you growing up? I
That
said,
you knew what I was going to look like and all this stuff.
no, yes, that's a part of it. But I said to you before, you existed before you were conceived. Because in my head, I had an idea. I had you, I visualized, because I've always wanted to have a daughter. And I visualized what that daughter would be like and what my relationship with that kid would
So
be like.
expectation versus reality.
No, I wouldn't say expectations because expectations become so nuanced that, you know exactly when she's going to take her first step. No, expectation, or she's going to go to Harvard or she's going to be this great Olympian.
No, but I mean
No,
like
those are different.
expectations of like what like parenthood would be like
No, because I raised a kid. I had a
yeah.
son. So expectations as far as raising a
Expectations for
child.
raising a daughter though.
Yeah, and I know you get stuck on the word when you say expectations, but I'm pushing back on the word
Okay, well,
expectations
we can use a different
because,
word.
and again, because it's such a weighted word when you say expectations, because then the kid could either disappoint you or overachieved.
But not
And for me,
expectations for the kid, but expectations of like what it would be like for instance, like say you've never changed a diaper, like your expectation of what changing a diaper would be like versus like what it actually is. Like,
bro,
is it worse or is it
if
better?
there's a parent out there with expectations about changing diaper, they got
Not
problems.
expectations are like what you think your vision of like what you think it's gonna
Okay,
be
so
like.
I'm going to answer the question, and I'm going to do it in the only way that I know how to do it
Mhm.
because of the way my mind works. I would say yes. I knew what my expectations were as far as what my capacity and what my limit would be by having a daughter, having a child. And I was already, I came to a point by myself prior to having you to know that there was no limit to what I would do, and there would be no resources that I would restrict from using to make sure your life becomes one of success. And and again, it's such a philosophical question because when you say having expectations, or I knew I had to step up my game and to be all that it requires for you to be or for you to have a good life. So as far as expectation, the expectation was me looking myself in the mirror and knowing what I had to do it would be limitless. And whatever
Mm.
resource it would take, whatever it take, I would have to be able to accomplish and do it in order to make your life successful. So from that standpoint, no, there was really no expectations from having a child per se, but more or less the expectation I have of myself of the kind of father that I would want to be and had to be in order to make your life the life that you currently have or
Mhm.
even better.
Was it harder or easier than you thought?
And again, trying to think about it in those binary contexts,
I
it's
guess.
just, it's so, I never really even looked at it because no 2 days are ever going to be the same
Yeah.
when you have a child. Is it harder? No. Is it easy? No.
Did you
Because,
feel prepared? Like when, like,
yes,
okay.
yes. And when I say feel prepared, I say that with a little nuance added that prepare for knowing that myself there was no limitations to how far I would have to go and would be willing to go or whatever resource it would take to be able to use those resources to be able to get or achieve or the goal of making your life a success. Raising a child in today's day and age, boy or girl,
Yeah.
because of all the stuff that you guys have to go through, it takes a lot of mental fortitude and a level of mental dexterity, so to speak, because you have to be able to juggle different thoughts in your head. You have to be able to interact. You have to be able to be on your feet. You have to be able to be intuitive enough because they're going to lie to you, which kids do. They're going to talk to you about things and they're going to demand things. And I learned that early from you as a kid is that she could be screaming and you're thinking, oh, she wants milk. And no, you give her all the milk in the world. She didn't stop screaming because no, milk is not what she wanted.
Hmm.
And it could just be, and I know in your situation, which I've said to you often as an older person from being a child, so to speak, or more going through adolescent, that one of the things that I developed with you earlier on when you were a baby, you just scream and you just scream and cry. And your mom and I would give you a binky, would give you a bottle, we'd give you whatever it takes. We'll give you all these different toys. And it just wouldn't work. And I discovered all I had to do was just pick you up and hug you and started rocking you and you'd be quiet. And I learned very early when it comes to you that it doesn't matter when you start screaming. It's not about something tangible. You're more of an emotional baby that you want that warmth, you want that hug and that embrace. And remember when we went through the whole thing as a toddler, you would just get into these tantrum, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And I learned from the past that all you wanted was just a hug. And we made a pact earlier on saying, look,
I remember that is a core memory.
and I said to you earlier on, I said, look, honey, just don't ever, you don't need to cry. You don't, whenever you're getting emotional or you feel like you want to have an outburst, just walk over to daddy and say, I want a hug. Can you give me a hug? And then it would alleviate a lot of that pressure and a lot of that heartache on your part. You don't have to
Hmm.
scream your lungs out because we were busy trying to figure out what's wrong with her. And all you wanted was just a hug. And so, even as a teenager, we have maintained that whole energy between us that, you know, even as a teenager, you go through these, your whole mood changes, you have these attitude and, you have these, you lash out. And what do I do? I just what?
You just give me space and tell me that you're there if I need a hug or if I need you.
Yeah, but I just, quite often I'll walk up to you and just hug
Yeah.
you. And then it just comes right out.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you'll just give me these attitude like, and it could just be an inflection in your voice. It could be, I might ask you a question.
And then
And,
I answer with a question.
yeah, and sarcasm and all these different things that you do. And I was like, okay, because you have all these tell. And these tells that you have is when, okay, she's stressed, she's angry, or something's going on. And I'll just say, okay. And sometimes it's triggering for a parent because when you get sarcastic with your answer, like you answer a question with a question, it's just like, oh, a parent would always perceive that and could always perceive that as, oh, I'm asking you a stupid question because that's how the sarcasm come across.
Mhm.
But yeah, so just to answer in a roundabout way, that these milestones for me, it's every day with you
Yeah.
because it could just be something you set out to do and you achieved it. It could be your grades, it could be a test that you took, or you have a way of sending me a text whenever you get your results on the test, or you stress so much before an exam or a test, and then you get a great fat A on the test, and then you just start flossing or flexing.
Um, did you ever read any like parenting books
No,
before? No, I'm just wondering.
no.
Like not even one. You read a lot.
No, I mean, reading a parenting book to me is just reading someone else's perception of how they raise their child and what they think, what process that they use in order to raise their child. And no two children, no two child are the same. No two parents are the same.
Amen.
I mean, what Susan might use to raise her child versus what Mary versus what, you know, John would do doesn't necessarily, you can't. And that's the problem when people adopt different principles from how other people do things and not really relating to your child from
Mhm.
your child's perspective, knowing who your child is. And so, no, I did. No, there's something to be said about your mom when she was expecting. There was a whole book on what to expect when you're expecting. Yeah, because
Like biological
those are
things, not
physical
okay.
things that your body's gonna go through. You need answers for, or your child, if this happened, that happened. But behaviorally, no, you
No.
can't. You have to relate to your child on your child's level, who your child is. So I never really read or even tried to.
And speaking of relating, was it ever like difficult for you as like I kind of think I know the answer, but was it ever difficult for you as a father, as a man to like relate to your daughter? Like did you at times find it like difficult or like jarring to like from your male perspective? Because I know that we talked about like how like fathers tend to as their daughters get older especially like have a hard time relating to them.
And I would say no, because to me, your gender wasn't forefront of my brain until you start going through puberty.
Hmm.
Because to me, what was first and foremost was just the love, the energy, and the dedication, and just the energy between us. Just the love that I have for you was that didn't matter because I was your dad. I changed your diaper, you poop, whatever, you pee, I gave you a shower. And the fact that when your mom and I divorced when you were 5 and we had joint custody, we spent a lot of those because I had 3 days out of the week
Hmm.
because the way we divided the week, so we both had you equally. When you were with me, you were with me. So I had to feed you, clothe you, shower you, do your hair, do everything about you. So to me, you were Madison.
Hmm.
It wasn't a question of your gender where I would be like, I put you in a binary box saying, boy versus girl, because the identity of who you are didn't come along until you were farther in your development, meaning when you start going through puberty. But before you were just my kid.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, yeah, I'm not, you know, dumb and stupid to look beyond the fact that, oh, well, this is my daughter. I have to braid her hair, or I have to put her hair in a ponytail, or I have to buy these, Hello Kitty pink shoes, or these, because we go to the mall all the time and we do girly stuff. So, but it was more to you as my
Hmm.
child and what your needs and wants were more so than rationalize what gender you were to put it in the forefront of my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like part of the whole girl dad like milestones concept to me is that like a lot of I dragged you into a lot of not very typical like father milestones. Like for instance, like my first like training bra or whatever from Walmart, like we went to go get that. And I don't know if I mean maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think most dads like, you know, face that milestone with their daughter. So I think like that's also what I meant. Like, was there ever like in those like instances like later in my life where was there ever like times where you were like, I don't think you were like you seem pretty prepared and like in for the challenge, but like did it feel challenging like for you to like relate to me in those like instances, or were you like
No, not at all. Because again, we go back to the whole point of when you have an unwavering commitment and love. You know, I said this to you many times, and I've talked to many people about this, about the whole Father's Day thing and the whole being a great dad and getting compliment about, oh, you're such a good dad. I was like, I don't see that because I can't relate to being what a good dad is. Because what is a good dad? A good dad
mm,
is this whole idea of you do what you're supposed to do, you do what you need to do, or you do what is meant for you to do in raising your child. For me, I've always said to you, in order for you to be a good parent, you have to love your child more than you love yourself.
mm,
And when you approach it from that standpoint, meaning there is nothing I won't do to make my child comfortable, happy, and meet all of her objectives. And from that standpoint, going back to the whole training bra, um, when it came to that time of your life, when you, the child, felt so, because, it's not like you woke up one day and all of a sudden you're like, well, we need to have this conversation. And, I think I'm at that age right now. I'm at that threshold where I need training bra. No, nothing, living life as it presents itself doesn't prepare us for moments like that. It just happened.
yeah,
Because I remember with you, when you came to me, you were in dance class, and
yeah,
your dance teacher or the dance assistant pulled me aside and go, you need to get her like, training bra. I was like, why? Why does she need training bra? And because you have said something to her, because like always, you were the bigger kid
yeah,
all through
very
elementary
biologically
school.
advanced.
Yeah, you were like what, 99%
Yeah,
percentile,
it's
whether you were
crazy.
like
Like,
your overdevelopment because you were always the bigger of all the kids at that
I've been the
age.
same height since I was like in fifth grade.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you were what they call
early bloomer.
early bloomer.
Yeah.
So, and you were one of the bigger kid in the class, and
Hmm.
supposedly the older kids that you were dancing around, they all had training bra, and they all, because these were like middle school to high
Yeah,
school
it was
kids.
like a year or two like age gap between like some of us.
Yeah, and so you might have said something to her, and she kind of pulled me away, and so by the time, I didn't approach you with it. I was waiting for you to come to me, and then you approach me. You're like, "Oh, Marky, we need to go to Walmart." And I said, "What do you mean?" Or we need to go to Walmart. No, you didn't say Walmart. You said we need to go to the store.
Yeah.
And I said, "For what?" He said, "I need to get something." And I was like, which is kind of always your
Dot dot
approach.
dot.
We need to go to the store. I was like, "Okay, what store are we going to?" Um, I need to get something. Okay, what do you need to get? Um, I need a training bra. I was like, what? Why do you need a training bra? It's like, because, Marky, I just need one. I was like, okay. And so there's a level of tenderness because for whatever it took emotionally, psychologically, for you to get there.
But that's also the thing. Like, I didn't feel like it took me any more emotionally or like psychologically to tell you than like any girl like telling her mom, if
And
that
that's
makes
the point
sense.
that I'm trying to make is that
Yeah.
instead, because I remember saying to you, did you talk to your mom? And you just kind of gave me this look like, oh, really? Whatever. And so when and we at that time, by that time, we already had the foundation of a relationship where there's nothing you can talk to me about. And
Yeah.
it was never the struggle for you to feel embarrassed. But you as a child, you have your own little pride and your own little
Yeah. Like not wanting to wear deodorant.
inhibitions that you have. And so for me, you didn't like come out and go, well, I need a training bra because I'm at that point. No, you just like, we need to go to the store. And
But
I was
there's
like,
certain things that you had to be like the deodorant situation
yeah, yeah. And there's
where you
things
guys were
where,
like,
and by, you remember what happened when I took you to Walmart
for what?
for the bra
Deodorant or for
situation.
bra? I just remember like I tried on some and like there was a lady there or something.
Yeah, I mean, here you are. How old? You might have been what, 7,
No, I was not 7. I think I
10,
was like
8,
9 or
9.
10 or something.
Okay, I just remembered. Here you are. We walk in the store, and I walk into Walmart, and I'm like, walk up to this lady attendant, and I said, "Excuse me, can you help us?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure. What do you need?" I said, "She need a training bra," and it was just very matter of fact. And I
Yeah.
was like, and the lady's like, "Oh, okay." And then she goes and she picks up a bunch. You know what size she is? And I said, "No, I don't. But what I would like is that you should give her 3 different options so she could go and try and kind of figure it all out."
Hmm.
And then she gave you a whole bunch and then send you in the back and went in the back with you in the fitting room. And you came back out and I'm like, did it work? And you looked at me and like, yeah, this one. I was like, all right, you ready? And we just went and paid for it. And that was it.
Hmm.
And from that point on, you just like, okay. And then clearly, obviously, I had to call your mom and had a conversation with your mom. I'm like,
Was there any like milestones that you were like dreading? Like
no. And again, no, I just did because
not even like first boyfriend, you didn't dread that. I feel like you did dread that.
no, I don't. I didn't dread that because earlier on we had very early conversations about because all your friends you would like because you were one of those kids who would come back and you always use other people behavior as leverage by saying, "Oh, so and so will have a boyfriend, or they're dating," and you never say anything about you, and then you just like in some roundabout way, and I remember having a conversation. I'm like, nope, no dating until you're 15. And then it just never brought up, even though you've always had this boy. Every time I pick you up from middle school, some dude carrying your book, your bag, and walking you to the car.
Crickets.
And I was like, hey, no boyfriend. You're like, he's not my boyfriend. He's just a friend. I was like, okay, just as long as no boyfriend. And then when we got to 15, you were like, and I said, you brought it up and you said, you told me I could date when I was 15. I was like, yeah, I did, but let's just try to figure this whole thing out. But it's not like I dreaded it.
That sounded like dread.
No, what my, my hesitancy was more about
The
not
kind of person
necessarily
I want.
you,
Oh.
but who is that person that you supposedly find yourself attracted to? Because then that's where the whole background and the filtering and all that, reconnaissance and all that stuff would come in. So, but it's not about dreading because I know at the end of the day, I could easily say no, or I could say, okay, I live up to my word where you said, you told me I could date at 15. And I would sit there and go, well, you're 15, but no, I changed my mind. But no, I didn't because I've always conscious enough to be able to prepare you and have these conversations with you and said, hey, look, if you're going to do this, you better do this. Or if you're going to do Y, you better do X. And so we've always had these conversations. I was more disappointed if I found out that you had these thoughts or questions and you weren't comfortable enough to come to me and have these conversations. That to me would have been a bigger disappointment than being dreaded by whoever you choose to hang out with.
Hmm.
Because clearly, I mean, it's all about the company you keep.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have you sit around with some knucklehead talking about, this is my boyfriend. No, it just didn't work that way.
Yeah. And then you said earlier that you didn't approach it like didn't approach me as a girl like differently than a son. Like pre-puberty, but I feel like you've said multiple times, well, that's different because when you have a son or when you have a daughter, like it's different this or this is different and this is different, like how long you can stay out and like your boundaries or your rules are like different.
Yeah, and understand what I'm saying is obviously I just have to explain emotionally. For me, your gender was never a factor
Mm-hmm.
before you got to like puberty, because that's when you have these emotional separation where me as a dad had to be more conscientious to go, okay, she's now turning into a female. She's going through puberty,
Do
meaning
not say a female.
when I say female, I mean an adult female,
Okay.
meaning now you're going to need your space, your privacy. You know, if you go to the bathroom, I can't just bang on it and tell you hurry up, because, you know, you need to feel that comfort in having your space, having your stuff, whether you were starting experimenting with makeup or you were doing your girlish things. At that point, there's this emotional separation where I knew as a dad, even certain things that you might have or I might want to, because I would always say to your stepmom, Sophie,
Mhm.
hey, can you do this to her? Can you ask her? Only because you didn't have the answers. You
Yeah.
were going through it. So you were just in the dark as much as anybody else is going through it. So I didn't want to make it more uncomfortable for you by imposing or asking you your uncomfortable question before you were ready to have those discussions. So what I meant by that whole thing was that I didn't separate myself, you from a boy or your gender emotionally. Obviously, consciously, logically, you were my daughter. We did girlish things, would go
Mm.
to the mall. But I'm saying emotionally, where I felt like how I was with your brother emotionally and disconnected from him emotionally at 7, because, you know, boys, you don't hold their hands after a certain age. They started pulling away like, oh, I got it. Or you allow them to develop in way a level of independence, even in their little energy feel around them. They need that sense of independence in order for them to thrive. Some boys do. With you, we just wasn't like that. There was no emotional separation for us, because one of the things is we always walk in the mall and you'd hug me, or you'd, you know, we just in terms of proximity to each other emotionally, you were always constantly have to be in contact.
Yeah.
And so even if we were sitting there, sometime we're sitting some places, you'd sit on my lap when you were like 7, 8 years old.
Mm.
And then you like, you know, talk and we'll play and talk to me about stuff. But that's what I mean, emotional separation when you became, when you went through, you know, now as a puberty, and just just to find your space, even in your interaction with the other girls that you were dancing with and you went to school with, you had to develop that sense about yourself and get that emotional, you know, independence. And so at that point, I kind of back off and gave you that room to do that.
Mm-hmm. And like I kind of brought this up to you like a little bit ago. I said that I think it's so like interesting when I'm like around like Micah, like my boyfriend, because his mom, like I'm around his family, and I just like think like, oh, that's must be so weird as a mom to like be looking at like a little baby like that you had like 17 years ago, and it's like came out like this little baby, and now it's like looking like down at you like it's like 6'2" and like a grown like person versus like when I view like my friends, like my girlfriends, and I like see photos of them as like little kids, like I'm like, oh, like she's just a girl. Like when you say like, oh, like she's just a girl, like because I don't know, like you look kind of the same in my opinion. Like okay, of course, like you grow up, like you like look older, but you're like still that little girl versus like when I see like like men or like whatever teenage boys as like young kids or like babies, like I'm like you're basically like unrecognizable because everything about you like changes, like how like their voice, like you like are like super, well, not every guy is super tall, but like you're taller, like you're a guy, and it's like your mom like looking at you like, so anyway, and you kind of explain like your perspective as like a dad who's had a son and who has had a daughter, like how that you perceive that like.
Yeah, I think it's very different when you have a son versus a daughter when you're getting into adolescence, so to
Mhm.
speak, because, you know, having a boy, you get that emotional separation so much earlier in life with that
Yeah.
boy, not because you as a father choose to have that emotional separation, but because your son kind of initiate that emotional separation. And it doesn't mean you're still not close. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're not gentle or tender with him and love him and do all those things. But because he himself, because, and you see these little experiences, whether through a friend or even, sometimes on a television show where the son would be like all emotional and very sentimental and very, you know, when he's home, he's always very open and always constantly embracing his father and his mother. And then they drop him off to school and he's like, all right, mom. And you try to kiss him and he's just like, all right, we're good because his friends are around or other girls are around.
Mhm.
And that's just a part of the process that boys go through. And so that emotional separation continues until that kid becomes an adult. But that doesn't mean, a hug and a kiss on the forehead will now becomes kind of handshake that you have to express that emotional sentiment that you have with that kid. But with a girl, it's very different. And it's different. And I'm not speaking for every girl or every boy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying traditionally. And for a girl, especially a daughter, and again, I have to preface it by saying this, it's important based upon the relationship that you establish at a very early age.
Mhm.
Because if you're a dad who never had that connection when that child was a toddler or even when that child was a baby, and that child went through toddler and then went to, all those different stages, and then all of a sudden the kid's in high school and you want to have those emotional connection with that kid. No, that's difficult to have.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if all the predicate was laid earlier on in life for a daughter when she gets to those age, whether she going through, you know, being a young child, getting to, you know, before pre-puberty, yeah, you still have that. Hey, she wants to hold your hand. She'll hug you and she'll come to you and she'll talk to you about stuff. And she'll have less inhibitions to being emotionally comfortable around you more so than and emotionally expressive around you more so than a boy.
Mhm. I've always said that like I think that like you have to worry about boys more, even though I think that like people have more parents have a tight leash on their daughter versus like their son. But I've always perceived like boys obviously being more immature, more likely to like succumb to like peer pressure, like follow the crowd and like try to like, because I think part of it is because of that like emotional detachment from their parents earlier on, that they like begin to like try to find their own way by themselves and like perceive like see themselves as invincible or see themselves as, you know, like they know everything,
Mm.
versus girls are more cautious. Obviously not every girl and not every guy is like that, but from my perception at least, girls are more cautious, girls are more um like, even if something is going on with them, like you see it expressed in guys differently, like whether it be acting out in school, and like most of the time the kid who acts out is going to be a guy versus like a girl. If a girl has something going on, I think that they're less likely to act out in that way, like of getting in trouble, and like it happens, but I'm saying I think it's less likely, versus maybe like it'll seep into like friendships or like relationships and stuff like that. So would you say that you worry more about like your daughter, or like obviously Mikey's like old, but I mean,
No, I guess the question is, as a father, would you worry more about your son versus your daughter, or would you worry
mhm,
more about your daughter versus your son? And I would say I would worry more about my daughter, but worry in the context of, which is very important, the context of what would be more detrimental to that kid's future. Boys, for the most part, will go out and do dumb shit.
But that could be detrimental to their future.
Yeah, but it's most
Like
times
reckless driving. I think that's more
most
a boy thing and
yeah,
stuff like
most
that.
times boys do things that are detrimental to their future. It's not irrevocable. Meaning, you know, a boy goes out and let's face it, we're not talking about things that are catastrophic, like you drink and drive, and
Yeah, but I'm
or
saying
you
even
go
like,
down the street, you speed and you kill somebody, or you have
yeah.
an accident. Those things are just catastrophic. Those things, yeah, boy or girl, adult or kid, when that happened to someone, that forever changes their life. So
Mhm.
let's just take those things off the table. We're not talking about anything catastrophic. We're
Yeah.
talking things that are within the norm of what happened through teenage years, that we all, from generation to generation, we all have done some dumb shit.
Hmm.
Boys, for the most part, they find themselves navigating a world that is more forgiving to them.
Yeah.
Girls, on the other hand, when they get into trouble, the trouble that they get into seems very unforgiving and most times irrevocable because it stays with them, whether it's through reality or perception, it stays with them. Is it fair? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, and I think the expectations from girls are so much different than from boys. And again, stereotypically, when you look at a family structure, family, how they give the boy a way more leash
Hmm.
or more flexibility or more, latitude to do things. Girls seems parents, we as parents, we are more restrictive with our daughters. And that could be explained in a couple of different ways. And I could only speak from my experience. It's more profoundly impacting emotionally on me as a parent when my daughter get hurt more so than when my son get hurt. And when we say hurt, we have to kind of put it in context. I'm not saying if someone go out and stab either kid or
Yeah.
does something physical to either kid, it hurt less for one versus the other. No. But just the level of protectiveness or the level of emotional vulnerability that we all have towards our daughter versus our son. Our son get a black eye and come home. The first question you ask was, what did you do to him? Did you hit him back? Did you punch him? Did you fight him? Or if he said no, you're like, your first instinct is, let's find him and have you punch him back, or, retaliate to a bully, or those kind of things. And that's just the normal approach. Not saying it's right, but I'm
Yeah.
saying our instincts as fathers looking at a boy versus a daughter. Our daughter come home with a black eye, and it's earth shattering because the tenderness and the sensitivity that you have in terms of protecting your daughter feels almost violated based on the fact that she came home with a black eye, and you're like, how do I protect her? And the instincts in all of us is to go out there and just scorch the earth to find whoever did that. And because, it's ironic, you don't often hear fathers, and sometimes I wouldn't go to the extent of saying parents, mothers and fathers, talked about, you know, our son have to be mindful of abusive relationship. Like,
Yeah.
be careful if someone ever hits you. And, we don't counsel our son like that.
Hmm.
But our daughters is like, hey, if he ever hits you, you make sure you tell me. It could be a boyfriend, it could be a husband. You call me. When you think of domestic violence, unless you're in a homosexual relationship, you don't necessarily hear too much about husbands getting beat up or getting abused, physical abuse from the wives. It's normally typically more often the husband or the boyfriend beating the girlfriend. So in our head as parents, we've been almost trained and customized to, you know, think that way about our daughters. And so, from that standpoint, I would say, just to get back to the question, is that we have a whole different approach. And it stems from an emotional vulnerability that we have as a parent towards our daughter versus our emotional resilience that we have towards our son. Because you get kicked, you get put down, get up, beat them up, stand on your feet, go back there, fight for yourself. Our daughters, it's automatic that we want to fight for her
Mhm.
versus, equipping our sons, taking him into the gym, teaching him how to fight, how to box, how to protect himself. No, we just said no. We short circuit that whole process for our daughters and get out there and try to look for the culprit who did it.
Yeah. And I think like one thing that you said, like unforgiving, like the world being unforgiving for like young girls, like I can like that's the first time that I've kind of been like, okay, well, I can see how you would perceive it that way because like, yeah, if a teenage boy sneaks out versus a teenage girl sneaking out, there's like a larger threat for the girl. Like obviously, like things can go wrong. Like obviously boys are victims as well in certain situations, but most of the time it's going to be a girl, like more
And I
vulnerable.
don't want to. I don't want to. You know, not acknowledge the fact here that it's societal norms that we
Yeah.
are, you know, imposing on these stereotypical construct or ideas that we do have. Yeah, but we live in a society that, whether it's from generation to generation, educates us, expose us to these norms. And so, yes, it's societal. And a lot of it, when you really take a step back and evaluate it and go, well, why should I feel any different? But what makes society so unforgiving to females? It stems from, the scarlet letter from way back when,
Yeah.
it's just
But
like,
also just biologically, like obviously this is not for every woman and every man, but 9 times out of 10, like a man is going to be stronger than a woman or like a girl is I'm saying like a girl is posing a larger like she's facing a larger threat like walking down the street at night versus a guy. And it's not even just physical but also like meant like a woman is a bit like we don't see too many women like, kidnapping people. Like most of the time it's going to be a guy
mhm.
kidnapping people. So, or mass, whatever, serial killers, it's not very often a woman. And if it is, it's like in the medical field in a very like discreet way or whatever. Like you don't really see women being attackers and stuff like that. So I think like that perception, like it's stereotypical and it stems from a lot of like negative things, but it also stems from a lot of like real like statistics that is just like
Yeah,
undeniable.
and obviously that's exactly what we're talking about when we're saying societal norms that
Hmm.
get superimposed on our ideology of how we approach these things and how we perceive them. But yeah, it is, you know, oftentimes real because even though it stems from those stereotypical understanding, but emotionally it lodged itself in a different part of our psyche and our emotional development. So we feel those things, regardless if it's real in some abstract world or not. But to us, as parent, it becomes real.
Yeah. But at the same time, like I think you've made like a very conscious effort not to like let those stereotypes like impede on how you raise me like in a greater like way. Like you've never like treated me like I don't think that you've treated me differently like because I'm a girl like in the broader sense of like if there's anything that I've been interested in, like with sports and like with obviously this is the modern like day, most parents are okay with their girls doing sports. But I mean like to the point where you like do support me like going to the gym and like you do want to take me to do things that might be like more like, oh, like male, like whatever. But like you don't really like see it that way. Like
Yeah, but again, it goes back to the whole point of where, when you raising your child, you want their experience to be limitless.
mhm,
However, you want them to be equipped with the knowledge, the resource, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, all those things. You want your kids to be equipped with those resources so when they go out into the world and they're trying to navigate this world around them, they have whatever resource that you bestowed onto them, they can tap into it to help them navigate that world. So as a parent, I never see myself or limit myself to be able to say, well, honey, you could only do this or you can't do that. Because that to me, you're limiting your existence and your potential. And I've always said to you, I grew up in a society where my only limits was the ones that I put on myself because I never believed in what other people told me that I should do or I shouldn't do based on whatever their perceived understanding of my capacity or capabilities. And so, way I raised you was that if you had a curious thought or if you had something that was driven either by a desire and you just want to experiment with it and it wasn't detrimental to your health and your stability, then yeah, sure, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, your experience and what you take away, even if you failed at it, but you take away from that experience, it gives you enough mental fortitude that you can store. So later on in life, you could always recount or get back to that place and go, I did this and that's what happened, but you have an understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the mind is the most powerful thing in the world. And, to me, I try to operate on a much higher frequency, intellectually, psychologically, than, others who live in a box, so to speak. And I'm not just saying it metaphorically, but one of the things that I've always said to you is don't ever limit your potential. And your potential meaning whatever you perceive that you want to experience and try. Yeah, you are a realist nonetheless, but understanding what your mental capacity is today is not what your mental capacity will be tomorrow. So if you limit yourself to who you are today, then it's almost harder for you to accomplish your goal or your desires for tomorrow. Because again, you only live in this box.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always been my approach to raising you. And just even in our discussions, I don't talk to you like a little kid. I don't talk to you like a baby. And when you turn into a adolescent, I don't talk to you like an adolescent. I don't, as a teenager, I don't talk to you like a teenager. Because again, my perception of your limitation is the ones that I put on you.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have the capacity to understand, the capacity to grow, the capacity to be intuitive enough. And that's why I always go back to the whole thing that I'm saying. I always pressure you and always say to you, I want you to have a curious mind, even if it's in the conscious realm. It's always better when it's subconscious, when you're just curious about things. But when you ask questions, it's all a part of growth and understanding and maturity and knowledge.
If you had like advice, like if a new parent, like a dad who just had a daughter, like what would your advice be like to them?
My first thing I would say to any dad who are having children today, you have to really look yourself in the mirror before you have that child and say to yourself, are you willing to love that person more than you love yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not necessarily prescribing that's the only way to raise children today, but for me, it becomes so much easier when you love your children more than you love yourself. And again, when I say that to people, obviously you could parse it and could, unwrap it, unpack it many different ways. But what I meant fundamentally when I say that is that when your child exists, no matter what the circumstances are, you don't ask yourself, should I, can I, could I?
Mm-hmm.
You just do whatever it takes. Meaning, you don't even look at your mental capacity and question yourself. Your child is in a burning building. You don't question yourself, am I going to get hurt?
Yeah.
Well, no, it doesn't matter if you get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Is your child hurting? And so if you live by that motto, or if you understand philosophically what that means, then that means your child will always have the best of you, all of you, and that connection that you have with your child. And again, it also takes, because you can't just be a dumb dad that loves your kid more than you love yourself. Because,
You love your kids so much you take them to the
yeah,
bar.
I gave you that whole analogy where there's some people, because again, when you say love your kid, it has to be within the construct of you as a responsible adult,
Hmm.
meaning, I gave you that whole analogy where there's people who live by that mantra. They love their kid so much they want to go to the bar instead of leaving their kid to the daycare or someone more or a babysitter. They'll take their kid to the bar and have the kid sitting on the bar and going, because of my love for my child, she goes everywhere with me. Okay. Yeah, but that's just, is that really, when you say love, what do you mean by love? So there has to be a level of maturity, a level of understanding, and a philosophical understanding about what life is about. Because again, taking your child to the museum or the zoo or the library, yeah, that's very constructive because that child will learn to read, learn to develop. But if you're taking your kid because you love your kid so much and you have to go play dominoes or you have to go play blackjack with the boys and it's your night for your kid and you take your kid with you and bring all the toys and have the kid sitting there while the room is filled with smoke, but you're there with your boys hanging out. But hey, I love my kid so much, I got to bring them with. That's destructive for the child.
Yeah.
So it takes a higher level of consciousness for you to be aware and not be a dumb parent to say, well, okay, I love my kid, but you love your kid, so you do everything in the best interest of raising your child, putting your child in the most advantageous situation, not to their detriment. So if that's understood from a parent standpoint and you want to have a
Hmm.
child, then the next thing I would say is once you have that child, you embrace that child and you learn how to communicate with that child because a child, before they could even speak, it's all about that energy that you have around them and how you interact with them. And again, sometimes it takes a village, but sometimes that village leave you behind. And when you get left behind, it's all on you as a parent. Because, and what I mean by that, that's more of a metaphor for, you know, you have a wife and you get married and you have a child, but the marriage don't work out and the marriage move on, or it got, you separate. That doesn't mean your child is left behind. That's when you have to pick up the pieces and become what you were intended to be in that child's life. And it doesn't matter if you were with the mother or you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, just to turn the tables a little bit about from your perspective as a child, what are some of the things that you experienced as a child that reminded you or made you aware of what a good dynamic or a healthy dynamic between a parent and a child is at the earliest age that you could remember saying to yourself or feeling, oh, this is my parents and I feel solid in this relationship.
I think like I spent a lot of time around you guys. I mean, I wasn't partly because of myself and like who I was or and who I am now, but also just because of you and my mom's protective nature. I just like I wasn't the kid that went to sleepovers and went to like sleepaway camp and like I spent every summer, every day, every night like with you guys. So my parents like became my friends. Like I always say my dad's my best friend because I spend so much time with you like growing up especially that it was just like you have no like choice but and also I noticed once I was in elementary school and even in middle school I spent so much time speaking to teachers because or if you would take me to some kind of like function or whatever I would be able to just like speak to all these people that were your age or like in their like 30s or whatever because I just spent so much time around you guys that I was better equipped, and if I found it easier to speak to people my parents' age versus kids, which some people could argue that's not a good thing, but I'm thankful for it because at some point we all grow up. And I think that a lot of times, especially now when I'm, this age, when we're like, oh, well, we're about to like go and be adults. And like, there's so many people around me who are still very much children. And you hear about college students, like, not knowing how to do like basic things or like not knowing how to like hold a basic conversation. And it's like, I've never struggled with that because I've been practicing for so long and I've been doing it and it's like so natural to me. So I think that like is just it's very telling of how our relationship is because it's seeped into every single aspect of my life when it comes to socializing, school, like, my knowledge, being good in my classes because I'm just already equipped to focus to like, you always say like school isn't to really teach you about those subjects, but it's to teach you how to think. And I was learning how to think at home because my parents would speak to me and we would have conversation and we had a good relationship. So I was able to translate that into my schoolwork and be able to focus and understand larger concepts. So I think a lot of teachers like that I've spoken to, they're always able to tell for the most part like who has a good relationship with their parents because like that translates into how you speak to adults, how you if you respect adults, if you know how to speak to adults and like interact with adults and you're not just stuck in like that little kid mindset forever where you're kind of almost emotionally like stunted because you don't speak to your parents that much. So I think that's always been like a telltale sign to me that I have, you know, so many benefits from having a good relationship with you.
Good. Well, we seem like we touched on a lot of different things today. And I think mostly you created a platform and just put me on it. And I don't want to say an interrogation, but it was a healthy discussion. So, Miss Madison Newman, I look forward to doing this again with you. And with that, you have any closing statement?
Oh.
Good. Say no more. We're out.